Okay, so John Steenhuisen brought out the DA big guns, all the ministers behind him, to deliver the DA economic growth and jobs plan. So, in this video, you're going to hear his speech, but if you stay and watch it all, you're going to hear him exposing what's really happening in the GNU. You're going to hear his thoughts about Gayton McKenzie's racial tweets. You're going to hear so much about what's really going on with growth, jobs, BEE, EE, EWC, and what's going on in the GNU. And at the end, I'll give a very quick reaction. Enjoy.
We're gathered here today in the economic, well, what should be the economic heart of our nation, city of Johannesburg, a city that was once synonymous with growth, a city that was known as the city of gold, a place of opportunity, ambition, prosperity, and of course, innovation. But today, Johannesburg stands as a very symbol of the crossroads that South Africa as a country faces. Buildings are crumbling, roads are decaying, our taps are running dry, and the people of Johannesburg in South Africa are suffering. As residents of the city, as many of you no doubt are, you all know exactly what I'm talking about. And why is this the case? It is the case because of years of economic mismanagement, corruption, outdated, outmoded policies that have enriched a small few and excluded the many. And yet out of this decay must rise a new path, not only one for Johannesburg, but one for South Africa, a path that restores growth, delivers jobs, and gives every single South African a fair shot at succeeding. And that is why we are here today. We are here today to launch our plan to turbocharge the South African economy. What we need to focus on doing is removing the roadblocks to growth and building a new superhighway towards growth and prosperity. So let me begin with a story of shattered dreams. I want to talk today about a story about somebody, and for the purpose of this morning, I will refer to him as Kabelo from Redress. Kabelo started a small logistics company with 2 trucks, huge ambition, and an exciting dream. And he truly believed that hard work and dedication from himself would be enough to succeed. But the system has continuously worked against him. He doesn't get funding because he doesn't have assets or collateral. He doesn't get tenders because he is not one of the lucky few in the country to be politically connected. And he doesn't have support because BBEE in practice has become a massive hurdle rather than a help, as businesses are forced to comply with the onerous and costly criteria if they're to have full access to the opportunities. And in many cases, achieving those criteria are just simply beyond the available cash flow of small and medium and micro enterprises, making it so much harder for them to prosper, while larger, connected organizations and operations continue to rake in the rich rewards that come with political proximity and advantage. The perverse incentive of BBEE has become that large companies now can cut out all SMEs to inflate their own BE credentials. And sadly, this isn't just Kabelo's story. It is increasingly the story of millions of South Africans who are locked out of a system that rewards the connected and punishes the rest of us. Because here is the hard truth. South Africa's economy is in the ICU. Over the last 15 years, our GDP per capita has shrunk by 10%. Unemployment has climbed from 22% to nearly 33%. And you add discouraged job seekers into that mix, and it's well over the 43% mark. And while this country is bleeding, and while our people are suffering, the government wants to now spend hundreds of millions of rands on a national dialogue, a talk shop, with no action, no reform, no plan, and now, by the looks of things, even more dwindling support, with the announcements of further major foundations withdrawing from it. As you know, the Democratic Alliance announced our withdrawal from the national dialogue weeks ago. It is an illegitimate initiative that frankly now lacks all credibility. And even former President Mbeki, who at the time was incredibly critical of our withdrawal from the GNU, which he expressed in an open letter, has now come to exactly the same conclusion that we came to, that this is an insider stitch-up designed so that the ANC can revive its electoral fortunes rather than a genuine discussion and action plan about the way forward. But the reality as well is that our citizens are sick to their back teeth with plans, with talk shops, with symposiums, with colloquia, endlessly diagnosing the problems in South Africa, pushing us further and further into the quagmire of analysis paralysis. We know what the problems are in South Africa. The problems are an economy that's not growing. The problems are unemployment. The problems are inequality, both spatial and economic, that still exists in our country. And the problem is too much talk and not enough action. From the RDP to the NGP to the NDP to now the National Dialogue, we have to endlessly thrash over these problems over and over again. But what we actually need now is decisive action to implement with volition and with vigor to be able to get the economy moving. And so we unveil our plan today to turbocharge the economy. And the first order of business in this plan is to target three major roadblocks that we see, which are holding our economy back and preventing economic growth, inward investment, and the ability of entrepreneurs and others to succeed in a country like South Africa. These three roadblocks are BBBEE, employment equity, and the Expropriation Act. BBBEE and the racial quotas that go along with it have failed. Over the last decade, black unemployment has grown, and black household income has fallen dramatically. These policies have failed, and together with expropriation without compensation, create an environment that deters investment, hobbles growth and job creation, and ensures that the majority of South Africans remain locked out of opportunity in this country. And this is the problem which people like Kabelo and millions like him face on a daily basis. And it is the reason why investors are steering clear of South Africa. These policies don't just simply fail, they cause significant harm to the people who actually need our help the most. People like Kabelo, who need a government that's working with them, not one that is constantly working against them. And so, it is essential now that these policies go. As South Africa stands at this important national crossroads and a time for action to be able to move forward in the right direction, it is essential that they do. Let me be very clear. The DA is not against transformation. We are not against redressing imbalances of the past. And the DA completely acknowledges the deep structural and economic inequality that still exists in our country as legacies of the failed policies of the past, but these are being compounded by a continuation down the road with the failed policies of the present. And so, the only way that we can truly transform South Africa and ensure greater involvement in the economy through fair, clear alternatives that lift people out of poverty and get them onto the mobility ladder are contained in our document. We need to free up our economy so that those entrepreneurs are able to get on with the business of growing their business. And we understand that when their businesses grow, millions of jobs will be created along with them. The only empowerment South Africa genuinely needs is more jobs, because nothing brings dignity like a job. Nothing stops violence like a job. Nothing destroys social ills more than a job. And with more jobs and a growing economy, many of these problems will be solved. Red tape needs to be dramatically slashed and SMMEs freed from the suffocating bureaucracy and crushing labour laws. And while many ANC ministers sit on their hands, DA ministers, many of whom are here today, have started implementing much-needed reforms in their departments. They're all here today, and they are free to speak with all of you about what they're doing, if that is what is required. Secondly, no economy can grow without access to cheap, reliable electricity. And we need to fix this energy crisis in South Africa once and for all by breaking Eskom's monopoly of electricity generation, by creating a truly competitive energy market. We need to introduce rapidly competition into generation and distribution. And we need to make sure that at a municipal level, we are ring-fencing electricity revenue that municipalities are bringing in to reinvest in crumbling infrastructure. For far too long, many local governments have used electricity revenue to subsidize, to fill the leaks in other parts of the creaking municipal structure, instead of actually reinvesting it into these networks. And that is why, despite the fact that companies and people pay their bills on time, are up to date with their municipal accounts, but still sit in darkness because municipalities are not investing in infrastructure and in other instances are not paying their bill to Eskom. We don't need bailouts. We don't need blackouts in South Africa. The third thing is to repair and modernize rail, ports, and digital infrastructure. The reality is, as we sit here today, our ports are ranked amongst the worst in the world. Far behind peer countries in Africa, far behind peer countries in other emerging economies, and far, far behind some of the more developed ports in the world. And that is why we cannot emphasize enough how important it is that we move with speed to concession, freight rail, and port terminals, and end Transnet's stranglehold. We've seen already this morning concerns being expressed about Transnet's ability to be able to continue doing what it's doing. Lack of confidence in its financial situation. The reality is, and we've seen it very clearly during the course of the budget debates in Parliament, that government doesn't have the money required to inject as infrastructure into our ports and into our rail network. The only way we're going to get them up and running, fit for purpose, and fueling a growing economy is through private-public partnerships, is through concessioning. And this is not something that hasn't been tried before. This is not uncharted territory that we would be moving into. Our peer countries on the continent have done it very successfully. And that is why our ports are being bypassed and ports in other neighboring countries are being favored by shipping lines. The fourth thing we need to do is to ensure that we reform public spending with a bias towards growth. Bailouts to state-owned entities have cost 310 billion rand. And enough is enough. Government now needs to stabilize debt, cut waste, and root out ghost employees. Public money must be used to build infrastructure, provide frontline services, but should never be used to bankroll incompetence and indifference by many of these SOEs. The fifth reform of the sixth is one that is close to, I'm sure, everybody's feelings, and that is fixing local government. Coalition chaos, corruption, and collapsed service delivery cannot continue. And we're championing a new law to stabilize local councils. This bill will set minimum thresholds for political parties to get a seat in council. Government needs to ensure that they protect and reinvest revenue from services directly into infrastructure while welcoming private sector participation in struggling municipalities. It was very interesting for me this year, having attended the NAMPO conference for my 8th year, to gauge exactly the issues that are on the minds of particularly people who are active in the agriculture sector. And for the last 7 years, crime has been the top of the list. This year, it was infrastructure, the state of roads, the lack of electricity, which affects cold storage rooms and cold storage pack houses, roads that are so visibly potholed and damaged that you cannot move goods and services on them without significant damage to vehicles. Dairy companies that will no longer travel those roads to go and fetch the milk being produced, often, in KwaZulu-Natal's case, by young black farmers to be able to assist them. It was heartbreaking to be at an event recently where a group of young black female farmers have done a concession and are working together to pool their milk, only to have their dreams, the carpet of their dreams, pulled out from underneath them because the dairy company refuses to traverse the terrible roads to be able to go and collect the milk so that they can earn revenues from it. Where do they take their milk? What do they do? another set of dreams from the very people who are standing up and saying, we want to play a role in the economy. We want to be entrepreneurs. We've been cut out before, but we are active in this economy. And yet the system continues to push them down even further. And finally, the sixth pillar is to restore the rule of law. It's now urgent that government creates a new anti-corruption commission, a Scorpions 2.0 to fight corruption. It is a shame, a national shame, that years on now, from a Zondo commission that cost South Africans almost R1 billion, that we're yet to see a single high-profile conviction of any of those architects, enablers, and actors in state capture. How can that be that that national travesty has allowed to go on unpunished? How can it be that politicians whose names appear in that Zondo commission remain in key positions in government, in the civil service, and in some instances around the cabinet table? What does that say about accountability and transparency? What message does that send to all would-be perpetrators of corruption and new versions of state capture? That after a commission, you'll simply walk away scot-free. What does it say to the whistleblowers who had the courage to stand up and speak out, to sit in that commission day after day and give evidence against those perpetrators at great cost to themselves and in some instances at the greatest cost? And yet those people who were named, those people who were identified, those people against whom evidence was led remain today scot-free. Not a single conviction, not a single major recovery, not a single victory. And it is because we do not have the infrastructure. The infrastructure that we had, the Scorpions, was dismantled. And it wasn't dismantled because it was failing. It wasn't dismantled because it wasn't fit for purpose. The Scorpions were disbanded precisely because that multidisciplinary model that brought forensics, accountants, lawyers, advocates, police officers, investigators, forensic investigators together to build cases started getting too close to the politician. And the reality is that we will not get on top of the scourge of corruption unless those who are found guilty, those who are accused, feel the consequences of it. Police corruption needs to be rooted out through lifestyle audits for senior police officials. CEOs of entities and government departments should be subject to lifestyle audits. It should stick out as a sore thumb that someone who is a CEO of a particular entity is pitching up to work in a Maserati every day. It should stick out as a sore thumb when very obviously people in organizations like the IDT are buying huge mansions all over the country, way out of what their salary band would permit. We also need to tackle rural crime head on. And now that South Africa's rural safety is in the international spotlight, it behoves us to do something. And one of those things that you could do urgently is implement the DA's rural safety plan, which, working together with community policing, will bring rural policing close to the ground and to harness the power and goodwill that exists in all of our rural communities to be able to combat crime and the instability in those areas. We believe that these 6 interventions, just these 6 interventions, you don't need to have a talk shop about them, we don't need to have a national dialogue about them. These 6 things on their own would start the road towards building a superhighway towards growth in South Africa. And this will create an economy where your surname doesn't determine whether you succeed or not in your endeavors. It will be a country where every single South African can earn, can build, can thrive, and most importantly, can employ. And this is not a fantasy. This is what we're already doing in many of the places where we govern. In the national government to date, we've blocked a 2% VAT increase. We've reformed visa rules to attract tourism. We've opened new markets for agricultural export. We've accelerated infrastructure investment. We've boosted safety in schools across South Africa. And we've grown jobs in the green economy. And we started the process of increasing broadband availability and providing internet access, easing stringent requirements that have been implemented by BEE in the ICT sector. And we're just getting started, but there's so much more that needs to be done. But this plan needs to become more than a promise. It needs to become a fight. And a fight that's picked up by every single South African. A fight for growth, a fight for jobs, and a fight for Kabelo and the thousands and millions like him all over the country. And that is why we don't need a national dialogue to determine what the things we need to do are. We have plans. We've got the medium-term development plan. And many of these initiatives will supplement what's already in the medium-term development plan. And that is why we'll be taking this document into any and all discussion on the economy within Cabinet. We'll be taking this document into every and all discussion on the economy in Cabinet subcommittees. And we'll be taking it to Parliament and to the legislatures and to the municipalities around the country. Because it is now time to implement. We have spoken for far too long about what is wrong. We now need to start doing what is right. And there can be no better time for South Africa as we stand at this crossroads to shrug off the shackles of the past and to unlock once and for always the true potential that exists inside South Africa, inside each and every South African, regardless of their skin color, and unlock that potential in the service of our nation. And so, if you are one of the millions of South Africans sitting at home, black South Africans, who are asking themselves the question, what has BE ever done for me? We've created 100 trillionaires, but what has it actually done for the Kabelos of the world? What has it done for you and your family? Why do too many of our citizens still languish in poverty, locked out of opportunity? And I ask you, do you want clean water in your tap? Do you want a government that spends money on you, not on politicians? Do you want electricity that you can rely on? Do you want your children to have an opportunity to have a job, and if they don't want to work for somebody, to have the freedom to take flight as young entrepreneurs with the nurturing and support from a government that's working with them? Then I say to you today that this is your plan. Take control of it. Take hands with us and join us in this fight, because the time for dialogue is over. It is now time for delivery. It is now time for action. And it is now time for the majority of South Africans to really start to taste the fruits of freedom in South Africa. A freedom that can only come through the dignity of a job and a growing economy in communities where you feel safe, in communities where you have access to services, and in a country with a government that gets up every day working for you, not against you. That is our dream for each and every South African, wherever you may be, no matter how hopeless you may feel. There is a plan now that can build a ladder of opportunity for you and your family. We need you now to join us as we take this fight to the highest levels of government, to the municipalities, to the legislatures, and to those decision-making fora, and share this plan and get to work delivering it. The time for talk is over. It's now time for delivery. It is now time for action. Thank you very much.
Samkele Masego from the SABC. Mr. Steenhuisen, just two questions from our side. One, the expansion of the GNU as announced by your partner in the Government of National Unity, the African National Congress. What's your view on that particular posture of the NEC taking that view to expand the Government of National Unity?
The last speaker, let me be very clear. We entered into something called the Statement of Intent. It was signed by all parties. The Statement of Intent makes it abundantly clear that if new parties are to be added to the Government of National Unity, that this has to be done in consultation with the parties that are currently in the GNU, and such a decision will be based on the sufficient consensus clause within that particular Statement of Intent. I don't believe that expanding the GNU is going to assist the GNU to go forward. I think it's going to complicate things even further. We already have 10 parties in the GNU. It's one of the largest coalitions in the world. And I think that there should be rather more energy and focus spent on improving the relations amongst parties within the GNU, particularly on how you find ways to consult, how you deal with conflict management and dispute resolution mechanisms that to date remain unavailable. And that is why every time there is a bit of frisson in the coalition, it blows up into a massive storm. I think that we need to be able to create the facilities and procedures within the GNU on being able to have good, open, frank discussions with each other without these leading to blowouts every single time. No, we have not been consulted or spoken to about expanding the GNU, and obviously when that discussion comes, we will have that discussion and we will express these views. But I know as well that these views are also shared by other partners in the GNU who are concerned about a expansion of the GNU and would rather see a focus on an improvement of the working relations within the government of national unity.
Secondly, on the issues pertaining to IDT, what has been the brief that you have been given by the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure within the country, Mr. Gayton McKenzie, on the allegations around the IDT CEO and the revelations of the Colin Mashawana Foundation allegedly using funds of EPWP to make deposits into some of the properties of the IDT CEO?
I've not been formally briefed by Minister McPherson, but I am very proud of the fact that he has led a determined campaign to uncover the corruption and mismanagement in the IDT. And I want to salute the brave work done by the media in this particular matter as well. And there are a number of journalists who stand out in this regard. And that fight that was begun had grave consequences for Minister McPherson in the terms of the very public smear campaign that was initiated against him when he started to raise these issues, a discrediting operation that was being run in the parliamentary committee, aided and abetted by Action SA and other candidates within that committee, and the chairperson of that committee, and a very well-coordinated bot attack on Minister McPherson on social media. And clearly the desperation of those who have got along to get along by manipulating government contracts and the like are starting to get incredibly nervous. I think the broader question that we want to get to the bottom of is how far does this train track run and whose station is at the end of it? And I think that's what's going to be very interesting to see over the next few weeks. And I think the increasing desperation of those who've been at the center of this network is starting to be seen in what was done with Peter Louis Marburg just under a fortnight ago. But I would make this point, that it is precisely this legislation that we're trying to remove and as an obstacle that is the fruit of these policies. Because when you have these insider-outsider networks that are created under the guise of transformation, under the guise of black economic empowerment, these are fig leaves for corruption, maladministration, and the like. And that the scenes we've seen unfolding in the IDT and many other places have been the fruit of these particular policies. And if you move towards policies that are open, transparent, accountable, where most responsive tenders get the job, I think that we'd start to see a limiting of these types of insider-outsider connections, these political crony networks of mutually reinforcing benefits. You give me these contracts, I will give you a house. You give me these contracts, I will make sure that you are taken care of. And who suffers at the end of the day in all this? It's ordinary South Africans. It's ordinary black, white, Indian and coloured South Africans that remain locked out of these opportunities because they are not part of these networks. They don't have the 60,000 rand to slip into a Christian Dior bag to hand over to somebody in order to sweeten the deal. And those are the people who are being worked over in this insider-outsider system.
On the issues of the economy, are you evidently saying that South Africans should be job seekers as opposed to job creators? When you use the phrase that nothing brings dignity as in a job, why don't you look at a multi-pronged approach, like also stimulating small enterprises, SMMEs within the country? How will that go about in inculcating a culture of job creation as opposed to a culture of job seekers within the country? Thank you.
The document focuses on entrepreneurship, and I think I mentioned entrepreneurship quite specifically, and Kabelo is a good example of a young entrepreneur who wanted to start a transport business in Vosloorus, who's been actively pushed away from opportunity because of that. We need to unleash entrepreneurs because they're the ones that create jobs in an economy. It's businesses that create jobs. And the more of those businesses and business owners and business entrepreneurs we create, the more jobs that they will create for others. Not everybody wants to work for somebody else. Many South Africans want to start their own businesses, and yet they are constrained by precisely the roadblocks that we identify in this document. We want to get rid of those roadblocks and put those people onto the superhighway to prosperity and growth going forward.
Junior Komalo from Newsroom Africa. As the Democratic Alliance, you have been in partnership with the ANC and the other parties in the GNU for the past year now. How has it been like trying to implement some of these policies that you speak about? Because this is not the first time the DA has spoke about scrapping triple BEE and the Expropriation Bill. We've seen the opposition from the ANC. And what do you think is going to be different this time around? Because you're saying that you're taking this document to Cabinet, to Parliament.
Junior, it has been quite frustrating to be in this arrangement in this year, because it cannot be right that one party to a coalition, without its own majority, comes down from the mount with tablets written in stone and says, these are going to be the policies of this government. A coalition government requires talking, discussion, and give and take on these things. And I think it was very clear from last week's press conference held by the governing party that they regard their policies as the be-all and end-all of a coalition government. And that cannot be right. No party, including my own, has a monopoly on good ideas. And what we should be doing is harnessing the good ideas and the plans and inputs of all members of the GNU to be able to craft an economic, a foreign relations strategy, a domestic security strategy to be able to really move the country forward. It cannot be that you're in a coalition with a party that doesn't have a majority and they come and say it's this way or it's no way. That's not how coalitions work. And we will be using this document to go boldly into those discussions to say that we are not here to be, to implement the NDR. That's not what the Democratic Alliance is in government to do. We're here to grow the economy and create jobs. And it's precisely many of the aspects of the NDR that are holding us back from being able to achieve it. And so these are some of the issues we've put on the table today. I think as well that the tide has shifted in South Africa. I read with great interest News 24's poll that they commissioned on triple BEE in the country. 2/3 of South Africans of all races believe that contracts should be awarded to the people who are able to get the job done, regardless of the color of the owner of the business. They want value for money. And less than half of South Africans want to see BEE continue in its current form. The majority of South Africans, black, white, Indian, and colored, have realized that this insider-outsider stitch-up that was hatched after the 94 elections between the ANC and big business has systematically excluded them from opportunity, is the reason why many of them are unable to get ahead. And for goodness sake, we've had 30 years now of the last 10 to 15 years particularly, of stagnant economic growth, of rising unemployment. Surely it's time to do something different. They say the height of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Well, like somebody sitting in front of a plug socket saying, well, maybe if I put my finger in the bottom one instead of the top one, I won't get shocked this time, and continuing to do it. We've got to do something different, and we've got to do it urgently and with volition, because I'm not sure how long the social fabric in our country will hold, as far too many of our citizens are excluded from opportunity and who are relegated to being mere spectators in our economy, while we create a small elite. And I did some figures earlier. William Gumede recently said that R1 trillion of triple BEE was spread across 100 people. Now, I'm a matriculant, and so even I could get the maths right with this one. This could have provided business development grants of 50,000 rand to 20 million South Africans. Imagine a 50,000 rand startup seed capital to a small entrepreneur to be able to get moving. Instead, we've created 100 exceptionally wealthy individuals who, surprise, surprise, happen to be connected to the political elite in South Africa.
When it comes to one of the ministers in the GNU, Gayton McKenzie, I just wanted to get your thoughts, especially Mr. Steenhuisen, the allegations that have come up against him when it comes to the racial statements that he has said on his social media platform. As the Democratic Alliance, what's your stance on that? Thank you.
Let me just say, I don't think that that language has any place in South Africa. Just as singing Kill the Boer has no place in South Africa. I don't believe that those epithets or words belong in South Africa. I think that there's an extra duty of care on leaders in society to be careful about what they say and how they say it, and to ensure that we don't divide people and that we don't use these racial epithets. And I think that there needs to be consistency. We've had a number of instances in our party where individuals have said things that we felt were not correct, and we've taken action against them. They've been removed from public office, and we have dealt with them. And I think there needs to be consistency. It cannot be all right for one person to say something just because they have a certain skin color, but it's not right for another person to say something. We need to be consistent in this. And I think that these terms are hurtful, hateful, and have no place in the democratic discourse. We have enough opportunities in Parliament to have discussions about where we're going as a country and what we need to do. I don't think that we need to be using social media and using the type of offensive and hurtful words that are used. And there needs to be consistency. And when one party or persons are called out, that consistency needs to carry through across the board.
My name is Yamtanda Kapa from News 24. You spoke quite strongly around commissions and the fact that the Zondo Commission hasn't borne any real fruit. Is it your view that the upcoming Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations brought forward by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi will not yield any fruit as well? And then in terms of with the national dialogue, with the other foundations leaving, do you feel vindicated with your earlier decision to walk out?
I would say this about commissions. Commissions are only as good as the outcomes, and that is the reality. And sadly, our track record on this is very poor. The Sariti Commission of Inquiry, no one was held accountable. We've seen now the State Capture Commission inquiry. Nobody's been held accountable. No senior politician is sitting behind bars. No massive civil recovery has happened on any significantly connected individual. It's as if it's just going to fade into the distance. And so I hope that the current Commission of Inquiry into Police Management will resolve in something. But the reality is, and it's the kind of same point I'm making about the national dialogue, is that it's no use having these recommendations if we don't get on and implement them. There's a clothing company, there's a famous slogan that says, just do it. And I think we need to do that in South Africa. Let's stop talking about it. Let's take the Zondo Commission and let's put some crack people onto absolutely getting and securing convictions. Let's get the rope and the best advocates we can find. Let's get the best prosecutors we can find. Let's get the best forensic, and the evidence is there. The spade work's been done. The Hawk should have been sitting at the Zondo Commission writing out the dockets while the evidence was being led. And yet we're still stuck, inertia, talking about corruption, talking a good game about eliminating corruption, but what have we actually done to secure convictions? What have we actually done to make sure that somebody sits behind bars? And what have we made sure to, the very least we could have done was to ensure that these individuals mentioned don't make it onto the lists of our political parties, that don't sit in key areas where they've been found wanting, and who don't then just carry on as if nothing ever happened, and that those 9 wasted years that robbed opportunity and wealth from the people of South Africa are simply forgotten. That cannot be right.
With regards to BBE, Employment Equity and Expropriation Act, last week, Fikile Mbalula of the ANC said, these are some of the policies that are the essence of the ANC. Behind closed doors and in meetings with your counterpart in the ANC, the president of the ANC, have you guys discussed sort of meeting each other halfway when it comes to BEE, expropriation, and employment equity?
We cannot just accept that there are tablets that come down from high and that is what we must implement. And we're precisely seeking to change the law so that we can remove these roadblocks, so that we can do something different. And there's an emphasis on the do something different to what has been spoken about in the past. If we want to genuinely see transformation, if we genuinely want to see more black South Africans participating in the economy, then we've got to get serious about the pathways to be able to ensure that. And the current pathway is not working. It has made a few people exceptionally wealthy, but the majority of our citizens remain trapped in poverty, in unemployment, without even the seed capital to be able to get what they need to be able to just start on that ladder and that journey. And that is where government needs to be more purposeful about that. We're also, these things are a deterrent to investment in our country. We've seen what international partners are saying to us about some of these practices and some of these policies and what that means for the potential of further investment in our economy. And so we've got to get serious about this. It's got to go beyond just the ideologies. It's got to go beyond just the talk shops. It's got to actually result in actionable, implementable, digestible, easy wins. And we've put 6 easy wins on the table that we believe are going to fundamentally change South Africa's economic trajectory for the good. And we're asking South Africans to join us in this fight, to be able to fight not just for this, but for the very future, economic future of our country. Thank you.
My name is Pitso Molamani from Kaya News. John, I hear you trying to fight the laws to make things easier to create jobs. This is nothing new. I don't see you are different from the ANC has been saying this for so many years. As an opposition, are there no actions that you can do while you're waiting to be in government without saying that we are not in government yet? For example, when all political parties prepare themselves for votes, they get funded. Can't you as an opposition party also get investors to invest in the plans of supporting small businesses with the example of the 50,000 rand that you've just mentioned there, without waiting? Because, sweeping the reforms, regulatory reforms, it's going to take long, to be honest. People are hungry now. People want jobs tomorrow. They can't wait for any political party to fight. Keep on fighting, keep on fighting. Are there no other measures that can be introduced that the DA can come with in the interim?
We're not in opposition, we're in government, and we're in government at a national level, and we're going to use our position as the second largest party in the coalition to drive for some of these reforms to be made. Where we are in government, many of these reforms are already well introduced, and that is why, for instance, in the Western Cape, unemployment is the lowest. We're doing a lot of these red tape removals. There's a unit in the provincial government called Red Tape to Red Carpet that looks at businesses being able to identify the red tape that's holding them back and getting it out of the way. In the city, the Mayor Hill Lewis has introduced a red button system where if any municipal employee or anyone engaging with the municipality is able to identify a piece of a bylaw or a practice that is red tape and holding back business from being able to succeed, that they're able to flag it immediately and that they can take action on those things. We're implementing learnerships. We're implementing small business involvement. Westgrow is actively involved in ensuring more smaller businesses are able to partner into value chains. And even in the ministries where we are currently in government, we are piloting many of these projects. I recently was involved in a project in northern KwaZulu-Natal that's incorporating small-scale chili producers and herb producers in rural KZN with companies like Unilever through public-private partnerships and investment by companies like Unilever in those local communities to ensure that they have the equipment, the dryers that they need to be able to then provide products into the value chain. And we will continue to do those wherever we are in government, and we will use our position in government now to make sure that these provisions, these 6 provisions, are championed in these governments of which we are a part.
Hi, thank you. John Eligo at the New York Times. From Mr. Steenhuisen, I was just looking quickly through the handout that you all gave. I didn't see much in there about like exactly what you all had in mind for the Expropriation Act. So beyond obviously challenging it in court, can you all share anything more about the Expropriation Act and how you plan to look at that?
I think that the Expropriation Act has been flagged by a number of our international trading partners as an item of concern. I know it certainly came up in the SA USA engagements, it's come up in SA EU engagements, and it's come up with a number of other partners who've recognized some problems with it. I think that getting the legal clarity now is going to be important, and I'm confident that we will be able to succeed in that case, and that the bill itself should be sent back to Parliament. The 7th Parliament is a different Parliament to the 6th Parliament. The ANC no longer have a majority to just simply steamroller legislation through Parliament. And I believe that we can fix what is wrong with the Expropriation Bill and make sure that we have an Expropriation Bill that is in line with the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Every country around the world needs an Expropriation Bill. The problem with this bill is the uncertainty that is created, the lack of procedure, and the whole issue about zero compensation. And I think once we have that legal clarity from the case that we have instituted, that bill can then come back to Parliament, and we can use our position in Parliament to be able to ensure that we have an expropriation bill that gives true effect to Section 25 of the Constitution.
Some of the reforms that you all that you all are thinking about regarding the transformation stuff, how do you think that may affect the trade negotiations with the U.S. if you all do implement some of these reforms, and just the bilateral relationship more broadly with the U.S.? And can you give us an update? Because I understand you're obviously part of the negotiating group in your government role. Can you give us sort of your take on where you see the negotiations are at?
I will be doing a press conference tomorrow in Pretoria with Minister Thabo and Minister Lamola, where we will set out exactly where we are at with the tariff issues. I don't want to conflate party and state at this press conference, and I'll be available to answer any and all questions as it relates to tariffs, to the state of the negotiations with the United States of America, and the mitigation measures that Minister Thabo is spearheading from DTRC to ensure that we can shield South Africa from some of the worst effects of some of these tariff issues. And I will look forward to engaging you all there in Pretoria tomorrow. Don't miss it. You are now formally invited.
Hajra Margie from Business Day. Mr. and Minister Steenhuisen, it's been a week now since the ANC decided to try and include other members in the GNU. Have you received no official notification from the Thuli House, from the SG of the ANC, or the president of the ANC? And then that makes me wonder, for the 100th time in the last year, how often does the GNU meet? Do you meet monthly? Do you meet weekly? Is there engagement in the GNU?
Hajra, I've received no notification from anybody in the ANC, whether it's from the Thuli House or from the presidency. I would say that one of the problems with the GNU is that the leaders do not get an opportunity to meet regularly enough. And every time there's a crisis, we're promised there's going to be a Bosbarat or some breakaway that's now urgent that has to take place. It's now been over a year. We're yet to have that. And I think it is one of the weaknesses in the current setup, is that the leaders are not able to sit and engage each other on a more regular basis on some of the issues, because I believe that many of the issues that we have could quite easily be ironed out through mature, honest and frank discussions with each other. And one of the key lessons I learned when we were in Germany together ahead of the elections, a study tour that involved the ANC as well, that it is better to talk about these things more regularly behind closed doors. And coalitions like the German ones meet almost on a weekly basis as the leaders. I'm not saying we need to meet on a weekly basis. It would be nice, but given the schedules, I think it would be quite difficult. But I would imagine that we should at the very least be having a monthly meeting as leaders of the GNU to be able to discuss the political trajectory and the path forward. And I cannot understand why these meetings, despite being mooted and promised, do not take place. And we will obviously continue to pressure them.
Why has the DA not nominated, or have you nominated, a candidate for the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition?
We're in the final stages of dealing with the replacement of Andrew Whitfield. It is part of a broader review of how we've performed in government. And obviously, I would also like the opportunity to have a discussion with the President around the appointment, because ultimately it's an appointment that he will have to make in terms of the law, and to make sure we're on the right page. But I do think there also needs to be greater consistency about how we deal with matters in the GNU as it relates to conduct of members in the GNU.
I understand the DA's challenge to be a few politically elite benefit. In Johannesburg, pens get bought for 57 Rand that cost 7 Rand 50. I still don't understand the DA's challenge to employment equity, because the majority of black professionals in this room, even those on stage, in the legal fraternity, in the medical fraternity, would not be where we are today without employment equity, without being given preferential treatment to get into that first job to work hard. So perhaps if you could help me understand the challenge to EE, especially since the Education Minister sitting here would know that in Joburg, at least, the majority of private schools are still whites are still the majority. So the challenge to EE sounds like a protection of privilege. So you can't then say you are not opposed to economic redress.
I would contend the assertion which you just made about the fact that a number of the colleagues in this room are only here by virtue of the fact that strict racial quotas have been implemented. I would like to believe certainly my colleagues in the DA are here on their own backs and by virtue of their skills, talents, education, and their taking of opportunities that were presented to them. And if we look at the perverse outcomes, particularly in the most recently challenged employment equity regulations, we were allowed to, I think, as business owners in the Northern Cape, employ one white person when it was not demographically representative of the entire province. That shows you when social engineering goes too far and ultimately undermines the hiring of further employees, investment, and ultimately job creation. And our opposition remains to this, and this does not make us anti-redress or anti-transformation. We just don't believe that you need to legislate social engineering when we believe that you need to provide people with opportunities to be able to climb up the social mobility. Thank you.
Thanks. Just adding to that, I mean, by way of practical example, is that when you revert to crass quota rather than a basket of things that you look at, you end up with bizarre situations. I was called desperately by a chocolate manufacturer here in the Gauteng province who had been given notification by the Labour Department that he had too many black female employees and that he was to remove a number of his black female employees in order to employ white males and Indian men. And that is what happens when you revert to these quotas. And luckily, we were able to help him stand his ground. But he indicated very clearly there's no ways he's going to let go of black female employees, many of whom are breadwinners in their families, who've worked loyally with him for many, many years, to remove them from jobs so that he can hire white men and Indian men, because that was identified as his quota shortage. And so it's these types of perversions that we need to deal with. I think if one looks at the broader document that the Democratic Alliance released last year, ahead of the election, it sets out very clearly what our approach is to redress and particularly employment empowerment, to ensure that people get a fair shot at being able to be employed, and that we deal with the huge, and the document starts off by a complete acceptance of the fact that we live in a country that is still deeply divided, with deep inequalities, spatially, economically, racially, gender, and that we need to have interventions to deal with that. But resorting to just crass quotas ends up with bizarre situations that end up disincentivizing people from employing other South Africans into their businesses.
Is the president blue ticking you? Is he not coming to meetings? What's happening around that? Please, could you clarify just that? Thank you.
I don't know if I'm being blue-ticked, to be honest with you, but I do think that responsible coalition management requires the largest party in the coalition to be ensuring that these mechanisms are in place. And it remains a source of concern for me that a year in, we still have no dispute resolution mechanism within the Government of National Unity. And this, the problem with this manifests itself, as you've seen, in the sort of flare-ups that happen during the course of natural political debate. And I think it is completely fanciful to suggest that a coalition with 10 parties in it is going to agree on everything all of the time. And we need to find a way to have more managed explosions of differences within the government. I think there's huge potential. I think the GNU was the right course of action to take. I think the GNU offers the best road forward for South Africa to succeed, and that is why we're part of it. I think it holds huge promise for real change in South Africa that will finally see things moving forward again after the decade of stagnant water and poor service delivery. And I think the GNU holds in its hand the opportunity to rewrite the South African story and to get us back to where we belong amongst the nations of the world in terms of trade, in terms of economy, back into a leadership position in Africa, and back leading the globe in terms of some of the areas where we've traditionally done well but have staggered in the past. But that is going to require a maturity and a frankness and an openness amongst the parties in the GNU to have constructive discussion. And one of the reasons I also indicated that we wouldn't be participating in the national monologue is the whole issue around, we can't talk to each other in the GNU. How are we going to talk to each other as a country? And that was one of our main concerns. And so I would again repeat the call that certainly the leaders should be meeting more regularly, that there should be more engagements between the parties in the GNU as political parties outside of government, and that would it would, I think, lead to a lot more stability. I think it would lead a lot more consensus, and I think it would lead to a lot more constructiveness going forward. And we're committed to those meetings. We also are committed to the give and take that is required in a coalition. I'm fully accepting of the fact that my party doesn't have 51%. We're of 22% in the coalition. And we need to understand we're not going to get everything we want, but equally so the ANC shouldn't be able to get everything it wants, and that there does need to be required to be some give and take. And we should all get some of what we want, and that should be reflected in the coalition policies on international relations, on the economy, on the jobs agenda in South Africa, and on the structuring of government. And I think that would be very, very important.
My name is Alpha Ramushwana. I'm a journalist at Eyewitness News. It's just a clarity-seeking question. In handling the matter of Gayton McKenzie, you've called for clarity, or consistency rather. Are you, in simpler terms, calling for the president to actually fire the Patriotic Alliance leader?
On Gayton, we've lodged a complaint with the Human Rights Commission. That complaint has been lodged. We are obviously calling for consistency. We had members of our party who were exposed for using those dreadful words, and rightly so, there was public outcry, and rightly so, there was pressure on us to do the right thing, and we've done that. And I certainly hope that the pressure and consistency will be followed through there. I don't think it's up to the president to decide. It's not my job to tell him who to put or not to put in his cabinet that is not occupying a slot that belongs to the DA. But I would say that there does need to be consistency with how we handle these things in South Africa. You shouldn't be able to get away with saying something because you happen to be a minister, but an ordinary MP or somebody else says the same thing and is dealt with accordingly.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk and unpack all of this in upcoming videos. So all I'll say now is no man can serve two masters. Either he'll love the one and despise the other, or he'll be loyal to the one and disloyal to the other. You cannot serve God and Karl Marx. Remember, to ring the bell if you're already subscribed, and we'll see you in the comments. Let's make history together. Cheers.